Hi everyone and welcome to the Scan podcast. Today we are joined by producer-director HaZ Dulull and returning guest, director and DOP Brett Danton. Thanks for joining us today, guys. I really appreciate your time on joining us on this podcast. If you just want to introduce yourself a little bit, that'd be great.
Okay, Brett, you want to go first because you're alphabetical order?
Okay, thanks, Alistair. Throw me in. Thanks, Alistair. Nice to see you again. Yes, so as you said, I'm a director and director of photography, sort of mostly in TV commercials, but I've been doing quite a bit of conceptual work lately, especially inside the 3D space, 3D world, metaverse. Playing around with all sorts of different rendering engines, Unreal, and then Omniverse, which we're using a lot. So that's sort of my world at the moment.
Yeah, HaZ Dulull. I'm a filmmaker. I'm also the co-founder of production company HaZimation. And what we do is we create animated feature films, television series, and video games, as well as content for the metaverse. We're currently in production on an animated feature film called Rift. Parallel development, we're also in production of a video game as well. My background is live action feature films and visual effects.
Great. It's great seeing, the sort of wide variety of projects that you guys work on. Hopefully we'll be able to, pick apart different workflows and things like that today. So what we were actually on to talk about is quite a selfish topic from our side, really. But it's how your workstation can affect your workflow. And both of you have been working recently with 3XS workstations from Scan, which are powered by ASUS. And really, what we wanted to sort of get into a little bit is if you could just share some information on the projects that you've been working on, and then we can dive into how the workstation's been and how you've found it. So Brett, what's the sort of latest thing that you've been working on with your 3XS system?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been sort of using on a few different projects, and I've been working between. I was working inside Omniverse, and the last project I've just done, which is for quite a big band, is actually we're using Unreal. So we're jumping between both of them. Both of them are requiring, obviously, using quite large workstations. I'd never, and I'm going to be honest, up until these projects, I'd never used any 3D software. So I jumped in at the deep end. And beyond that, I'd never actually used a PC either. So I was a complete visual person coming from a Mac background. And then obviously jumping into things like Unreal Engine, jumping into Omniverse, I had to run a PC. And I thought it was going to be something where I was tearing my hair out. And to be honest with you, it's actually been a really interesting development for me. I've actually found it quite a painless swap over, so much so that I've even moved my editing environment, and you can see I've got DaVinci Resolve around me. I've actually moved all of that across to PC as well, which is something I never thought I'd do. And that's because I've got the Thunderbolt input on the scan system, which has just changed everything. So I have, I think, something like 160 terabytes of RAID sitting here through LAC, and I can just switch those drives between Mac and PC. In terms of graphics power, I'm running 2 RTX 8000s in the machine, so it absolutely flies, which I don't think I could do on any other system.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of power in that workstation there, and it's so interesting to hear that you made such a change. I think a lot of people would be hesitant to switch, from Mac to PC or vice versa as it is, but to move into a whole different field of development at the same time is a bit of a challenge, and it's a testament to you actually getting through and now producing some incredible work from it as well. So yeah, it's great. It's great to hear that. How about you, HaZ? What are you currently working on at the moment?
I'm currently in production on an animated feature film, also using Unreal Engine. So the thing that makes this project special is everything is what you call final pixel. What that means is usually when you do an animated film, you do several passes, you render out, and then you bring all the passes together in compositing, and then you render it out and put it in your edit. What we're doing is everything that's coming out of Unreal Engine, everything that's generated out of the GPU is exactly what we're going to end up in the edit. So what you see is what you get, which is very interesting because my background's usually visual effects. We're so used to combining elements and doing a lot of stuff in post and comp. Our setup, we're not as crazy as Brett. Like Brett's got the beast of the machine. Like I aspire to get that set up one day. But I think for us, we're just using an NVIDIA A6000 card, which is very powerful, by the way. But I've got a similar thing with Brett. I started off, I'm a Mac person. Being a filmmaker, we're constantly on Macs, we're constantly editing, Final Cut and even Resolve as well. And then it was only last year I made transition to laptops, and I've always been on laptops because I'm always moving around. I never thought I'd never need a big workstation, and being a director constantly on the move, you're constantly editing on the fly. So it was only like the start of this year I decided to go desktop for two main reasons. Firstly, expandability. I needed to constantly be able to expand, like put in more SSD drives inside. I needed, be able to swap out graphics cards. My external GPU could only take certain size graphics cards, and these cards are getting bigger and powerful. But also, we need a lot of coolant. The thing when you're running real-time game engines, pumping out 4K imagery, at all in real time, laptops can heat up. So that's why I made the move to a desktop, and we have so much coolant system in that desktop, and we're able to expand super quick. And at the same time, we're making a video game because we're gluttony for punishment. We just want more work. And the interesting thing about it, they're both using the same engine. And when you're making a video game, it's a whole different set of development, and that's where an actual good PC setup really helps.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, by the sounds of it, neither of you decided you were going to try and make this easy on yourselves, did you? Trying to learn new software and switch operating systems and develop a video game at the same time. It's great to see that you're able to do this though, and we're really happy that these ASUS powered 3XS workstations are able to help you do that. And it's also really interesting to see, although you said you were both using Unreal, it's interesting to see the different ways in which they're being used. So HaZ, you've mentioned, this project Rift that you're working on, where you're making the feature film, the animated feature film, and a video game at the same time. How's it been juggling those two elements? Like a traditional video post-production workflow with video game development. What's that been like?
It's been interesting, that's for sure, because you change the way you structure your project, how you plan your project. Like, just like what Brett did in terms of like moving his DaVinci Resolve to his machine, I did the same thing. Originally I was doing all the Unreal Engine work on the PC, and all my editorial I was doing on a Mac. In fact, I think Brett, it was you actually, when we were shooting the promo video for ASUS, you suggested actually, or before that, to move over to PC. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to try that, because I'm just so used to editing, because I'm, ProRes and all of those. But I realized I'm not editing ProRes, I'm editing EXR frames that are coming out of Unreal, so it doesn't matter if I'm Mac or PC, right? And I found with the PC, oh my god, like the minute you change the settings to like use your NVIDIA GPU, oh my god, like I'm going backwards and forwards on 4K. I'm not even working in proxies, which is like mind-boggling. So that's made a massive change. It allowed me to have more of an iterative, agile workflow, which means now I can constantly iterate. I don't have to go and render proxies, bring it in. So what we have is we render our EXRs as a shot, we put it into DaVinci Resolve, and that's in there. Now I go into Unreal, I want to make changes. I make my changes, render, overwrite those EXRs, my edit is updated. So by the end of the week, I've got an updated 20-minute segment of the movie. That speeds things up massively. In terms of the video game, obviously the video game's a different mindset, but because we're using real-time engines, it means that when you're making an animated film in a game engine, you kind of have to think like a game developer in a way. You kind of need to like not think so much like traditional animation, the way it's made, where you do your animatic, your lighting, or your storyboards before that, and then you do these various stages, and all these hundreds of people pipe into it. Whereas our team's a team of 6. We use source control to manage everything. As a director, my job as a director is different. This whole way of working has redefined my job as a director. Usually with directors, I'm like, writing a million notes, direct the team. Here, I'm physically creating each of the shots myself, and my team feeding me assets, feeding me effects, feeding me all this other stuff. And so I have much more control, and we are control freaks as directors. So having real-time power with an amazing system to support that enables me to be able to be as creative as possible and not think about bottlenecks.
Yeah, Yeah, no, that's great to hear, and I'm sure all directors wish they had the same level of control over every project. It's really interesting to see, especially as you mentioned, switching from sort of just normal CPU processing to GPU processing, how that's managed to speed things up. A couple of years ago, the thought of working in 4K real time, animation and 3D work was a pipe dream unless you were paying tens of thousands of pounds for the highest end server. But really, you mentioned earlier you're working on an A6000 and you're able to do this in real time, and it's saving you so much time. And I think that's it. We're very much on almost the bleeding edge of technology at times with this. And speaking of the bleeding edge, Brett, last time you were on, we were talking about Omniverse, which really is just this absolutely massive tool that's just at the forefront of sort of virtual production and 3D collaboration at the moment. What's your experience been of running Omniverse on your 3XS system?
It's obviously been a little bit of a learning curve because we started with the very first version of Omniverse, when it was out in the first beta version. And it's interesting watching it as it's progressed up towards the release version, and it just keeps getting better and better. But the thing that's blown me away with it is the path tracing and using that inside the machine. I'm sort of different to HaZ. I mean, I don't have any of HaZ's knowledge in terms of building scenes in things like Unreal in things like Omniverse. What I tend to do is I've got other people that build those assets for me and then supply them to me. But because my background's a director DOP, I'm then lighting the stuff inside of that software. So, I got some stuff in from Unreal that we had built in America. I had some stuff that we had in Omniverse built in Poland. That stuff's all coming in from me. And what I've just found is that I'm then having to match those things to especially with the Omniverse, because Omniverse, the path tracing in it is so good. I'm basically matching those scenes with real life scenes that exist in the physical world. And when I get the stuff back, especially when it's built inside the 3D world, what I find is the 3D artists maybe don't light it the same as the physical world. So I end up relighting it. So half of my job is relighting it inside of the on a desktop environment to match the real world. And what I find with this system is so fast, I can move it around, and it is lighting the way I had expected to light if I was in the studio. And that for me is quite mind-boggling to be able to sit here, light a car, light an environment the way I would as if I was in the studio. Is crazy. I mean, it reacts the same as stuff really does in reality. And talking too about and I think HaZ brought up some good points. I tried the laptop thing. I had to jump to the desktop, and I was literally saying to somebody after this last project we just did, I just had running in Resolve on this system. I had a 9 camera feed multi-track, and I was playing back in real time with 9 6K raw camera feeds inside Resolve to give you an idea of the speed that I'm running at and flipping between it. So I mean that's a massive amount of data.
Oh, it's huge.
I tried 12.
I mean, that's totally beaten me. That's beaten me, Brett. I thought 4K EXRs were badass, but you just don't respect it.
So nine feeds of raw coming in, all in 6K from Canon C500. We synced them all together, and we were editing it. And also as well, it has this point working inside EXR files. Yes, they're individual frames, so you're not having to go into, because I was worried about the QuickTime format, and yeah, I keep it all in then inside EXR. And I don't know about you, HaZ, I find EXR plays really quickly, really well.
Yeah, I was very surprised by it. I bring my EXRs in. I do like the linear to sRGB conversion, so I have my color space in there. I throw some grades in there. I even throw some like effects in there, like fusion effects, and I'm playing them back, and sometimes there's a slight little stutter, but it's enough for me to still work in a way. I'm not having to like render a quick timeout and then bring that back in to watch.
And as you say, sometimes you only have to replace those frames that you need to replace. You might not have to replace the whole lot, which is great.
Absolutely.
So it makes it a lot faster in that environment as well. Or you decide, well, I don't want to do that render, and you've got those renders to go in and test. So it's a really fast way to work.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting now that we've got to the point where, these workflows run so well on a desktop that your main limiting factor is actually your storage. As long as you've got storage that's fast enough, there's nothing stopping you working with 4K EXRs or, 9 streams of 6K footage. It's great to see, and something that slightly diverges from the topic of workstations and things like that. I always think it's interesting to hear people talk about lighting again. Obviously we all know how important lighting is to a scene, and at times it feels like it's almost a sort of dying art. But just to pick your brains, both of you, do you think the sort of move to Unreal Engine for virtual production or animated work or anything like that, do you reckon that having the access to these lights, last time you were on, Brett, we spoke about being able to create like a 100-foot softbox over a forest and things like that. Do you think that might actually lead to a bit more of a development in terms of the lighting that people are trying out in these softwares, or even the sort of ray tracing or path tracing type stuff? From my perspective, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that develops.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, after you, HaZ. You go, HaZ.
Yeah. I know. Mine's gonna be super short though. I mean, mine's basically like it's down to GPU. It's so GPU driven. Like I'm not using path tracing. I'm using just ray tracing, but because ours is anime, right? We still want to have reflection. We still want smooth edges. Want like really smooth anti-aliasing. We want to make sure the shadows fall correctly or the reflections. And I don't have to worry so much. Like, for example, I don't need to compile my shaders because I'm doing dynamic lighting straight out the GPU. So as I move my light around, it's calculating it. Whereas like back in the day, like a year or 2 years ago, like I would have to build my lights, compile my lights. Every time I move a light, I have to build the scene again, like in terms of computational, right? So that it's cached somewhere so I can move around. Whereas now, because I'm using amazing GPU and graphics cards and the motherboard to support that graphics card, means that I don't have to worry about it. That speeds up my lighting massively. And
I'm doing a slightly different workflow because I'm coming out as a cinematic 4K HDR finish quite often to then drop into TV commercials or users background. So I'm working inside sort of ray trace to start with to set it all up, and then rendering out in path trace. But even still, I mean, to be able to sit here, render out a path trace sequence, sometimes it takes 20 minutes to render, but I'm talking a proper 4K 16-bit path trace. That would have taken days, a few years ago. So it's just got so much quicker. And I'm, some of that stuff I've shown people that path trace stuff that we've rendered out to drop into commercials as sequences. They can't tell the difference between that and the real world stuff. So and to be able to do that on your desktop is crazy. We had a meeting last Friday with a well-known car manufacturer who was showing them some sequences of another car rendering, and they kept asking, "Hey, so which one was done on the desktop and which one was shot in the wild?" They literally couldn't work out which one was which.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's such an exciting time, to see, only a few years ago, home animations were visibly home animations. Now you can build, realistic, scenes and effects, and it's just so crazy but exciting at the same time as to what you can actually build. And we've touched on it a little bit here and there. Obviously, Brett, you mentioned you've got the 28,000, and HaZ, you've got the A6000. So that amount of GPU power is great. And it's something that we build our systems around is not only just the GPU. Obviously, with the ASUS ProArt motherboards we put in the 3XS systems, they've got support for PCIe Gen 4, but also, you know, we I think Brett, you mentioned it, they've got the Thunderbolt connectivity. They've added in 10 gigabit Ethernet as well. So if you're working on like a NAS, if you've got shared storage, you know, all these sorts of developments that are coming together, we're trying to put into these 3XS systems so that when people do get, you know, into working on these sorts of projects, they're never limited by the hardware. They're just enabled by it. You're able to just power on your system and go and create whatever it is you want, and that's really important to us. And it's a big thing, you know, down to the choice of the motherboard. Obviously, like I mentioned, we're using the ASUS ProArt motherboards. They allow us to do that. But I also believe that both of you are ASUS ProArt ambassadors. So you've had a bit more hands-on experience, not just obviously with the motherboards that are in your 3XS systems, but with the ProArt range of monitors as well. How have you guys found the whole ProArt ecosystem as it is?
In terms of, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
No,
yeah,
Brett,
so
you go
monitors, I
first
mean, I'm
this
lucky
time.
I've actually got 3 sitting here in a row on my desktop, which I've been using for Resolve. In terms of color space and in terms of workflow and in terms of using them with the calibration you can do with them, with the way that, you know, they work between all the different color spaces. I mean, in terms of computer monitors, I found the ASUS definitely the best that I've used to date. I've even so much so that, you know, the last shoot, we took the monitors with us. They go onto our computer cart, so the DIT to use. They're looking at all, you know, the way everything's working, and it gives me, what's really good is it's given me a complete workflow from my desktop to studio to being on set, and that one monitor is going across everything, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's a similar thing to me as well. Like, you know, knowing, I mean, the big thing for me has always been, like, especially when you're working in animation and very visual driven things, is you want to make sure whatever you deliver is going to be seen correctly. And, you know, color space and calibration has always been, like, you know, even when I was in visual effects, it's the thing that's the bane of our life. Oh God, this shot looks great, but, you know, then someone gives a note, it looks a bit milky here, or the blacks don't look right. You're like, oh no, it doesn't look like my monitor. So, you know, the good thing about the ASUS monitor is that it comes with this calibration system, you know, and it's so simple. You just go through, I mean, someone like me who's just an artist, I can just calibrate my monitor, but I can calibrate it based on the output of deliverables. So, you know, the video game would have a slightly different calibration, as opposed to my animated film would have a different calibration. My animated film is designed for streamers, you know, people like Netflix and Apple. And I can create profiles and save it in the monitor. That's the beautiful thing about it. And I can just flick between the various profiles. That's super important, especially when we're doing deliverables. And we're doing, you know, usually when you make a movie, you got to go put it through what you call a QC lab, where they test it to make sure that, you know, the color is correct and all the visual elements that make sure you don't get a fail in your report. Then, because that's how distributors work, right? But also for us is connectivity as well. You know, the fact that I can connect things at the back of that monitor, you know, is not just a monitor for visuals. That's super useful. And lastly, HDR is the big thing that everyone's, every streamer we speak to, like, you know, if you had HDR, that would definitely add a premium level to your content. And knowing that we're using Resolve, and the fact that, you know, Unreal Engine has tonal mapping for HDR, and then we can render EXRs and do an actual HDR grade before we go into the main grading facility to do an actual proper HDR. I can actually see the HDR version myself here before going to the big place. So I can make decisions as a filmmaker when it comes to color and tone and scene setting on that monitor before. And so that when I go to the facility, I'm not booking a week of grade time. I'm booking a couple of days.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, both of you have mentioned using Resolve on your projects, and you touched on it there, HaZ, you know, being able to view, especially like HDR content, be able to view that, you know, you know, in your suite, in your office or at home or wherever it is, without having to go into, you know, a facility where you're you know, paying a premium for it, is massive. And as a sort of reference monitor, you know, we're at this point where things like or monitors like the ProArt range are really, affordable monitors, but they're also really good and really color accurate. So it's not like, several years ago where your entry level color grading monitor was going to be sort of 5 to 10 grand. We're looking at affordable monitors where they're not only color accurate for your, SDR 709 web deliveries, or even your sort of P3 deliveries for cinema. They're accurate for your HDR deliveries as well. And I think that's a big thing. That sort of accessibility is massive. Being able to sort of get hands-on with these new tools and experience all these different things is only going to increase the volume, but also the quality of work that we're seeing coming out of everywhere, because it's now no longer just limited to, those few post houses that can afford to buy, the latest Dolby Vision monitor for their HDR grades. So everything's been so positive so far, and we really appreciate hearing all this feedback on the 3XS systems. One of the things I was going to ask is, obviously you both moved across from the Mac operating system, as you mentioned. When you were moving across, did you know what sort of the requirements you needed were going to be? Did you do a lot of research, or were you pointed in the right direction? How did you come about settling on the systems that you went with in the end?
I did a lot of research. I'm a sucker for Googling constantly, and I think I have to. Being in production, when we made the switch, we had already started pre-production on the movie. So I couldn't really afford to get the wrong system and then realize, oh, I've got the wrong setup, and then change it. To make a change while you're in production is hard, right? It's a risk. So I obviously worked closely with the ASUS guys. They knew what we wanted in the machine, and obviously working with you guys, you guys customized system knowing what we wanted. So I think for me it was a bit easier that you guys were listening and say, I need to do this. I need a lot of drive space. I need SSDs. I can't be dealing with other type of drives. I need to be able to expand constantly, because I don't want to buy a machine that's just going to be used for one project. I want to be able to, as the projects grow, if we're making a series, there's more content, I want to be able to put more drives. I want to make it expandable, as opposed to buying a new machine. So that was very important for me when making that selection choice. But also I knew I had to make sure that the motherboard was able to take these new GPUs. At the time I hadn't even decided what GPU I was going to get. I just knew I wanted to get the latest ones. So a lot of research on that, and then working closely with you guys, it helped when I got the box and I opened it and I get the spec sheet. I'm like, that's everything I wanted.
Yeah.
Boom. So it helps.
And how about you, Brett?
So I'm a little bit different. I'm still jumping between Mac and PC, so that's kind of quite interesting. When I go out, I'm still using a laptop quite a bit. And that was the first thing was, I was holding back because I wasn't convinced I could do everything on a PC that I wanted to do. So my first thing was and also as well, a lot of my files and my stuff was already backed up on RAIDs that were Mac configured, or they work with the Mac system. So for me, I knew I had to have Thunderbolt, which is working really well. That's great because the drives are just working between the two machines. I can plug them in, plug them out. Doesn't matter which machine I'm in. Same with the monitors. I've got Thunderbolt in on the monitor or DisplayPort, which is great. So with the ProArt monitor, I'm using it on both the Mac and the PC, which is great. But then in terms of the PC system, I had no idea what I needed. I had literally no idea. So I left it to you guys to configure. I was thrown at the deep end and using Omniverse and Unreal. I knew that we needed some pretty serious grunt to do it. I was lucky I was guided by NVIDIA on what cards we were going to get. So the cards were then, so we started with the cards, and then you guys worked out a system that I could use to say, well, this is the system you're probably going to use, and you guys sent me a system sort of similar to HaZ. A box turned up, I opened it up and plugged it all in, and away I went. So to be honest with you, I haven't needed to add anything else to it, haven't needed to do any changes, and it works. We actually, quite often I have 3 to 4 monitors plugged into the back of the system, all working in HDR. I'll have sort of 6 or 7 RAID 5s hanging off it. I'll have control surfaces plugged off on it. I have multiple things. I've got a Black Magic box hanging off it. I've got speakers hanging off it. I've got a Dolby 5.1 system hanging off it. So in terms of stuff that I've got plugged into it, I mean, it's phenomenal what it's powering. And whilst I'm talking to you on a Skype call, it's still running Omniverse in the background.
Yeah.
So, you know, it just keeps going on what it can do.
That's the thing, you know, that never changes, is it? The amount of peripherals you need to hang off
Yeah,
the back of any
peripherals,
system
yeah.
when you're
Peripherals just
when
keep
you're working in
going.
a post-production workflow. And you know, we really appreciate all the really positive feedback, and we love to get involved with these workflows and see how we can, you know, not just meet the requirements of the software, but actually build and tune systems as they're needed. So, I mean, the next question is, you know, and Scan might not thank me for asking it, but, you know, the next question is, if there was going to be anything you would change about your system, what would that be? I'll go to Brett this time first.
To be honest with you, the only thing I would change with it is I would like, and if I'm going to be 100% honest, sorry, Scan, is because I've found the system so good, and because we're working in studios a lot, it would be amazing to have a system that was like a box that had handles and stuff on it that I could lift it up, because I'm taking the box to the studios now. It's not just living in, because, and I'm sorry, I have a dog that's going off crazy in the background. It must be a courier turning up with another box from Scan. No, so because I am taking this system and I'm taking it out, you know, so we went off and we just built a 12-meter display wall on location. You know, I'm taking this system sometimes to work with it or run with it. So I would like to have something that had big carry handles on it. That was, you know, that was almost film set proof in terms of it. And it's really only the box is the only thing that I would like to have is something that I could just wheel out and put in the boot of the car.
Yeah.
That would be
totally understand that. I mean, one of the things we're actually looking at the moment, just to sort of give an insight as to where we are, not just to you guys, but to anyone watching, you know, we are looking at adding a lot of rack mount cases and things like that for on-set work. We want, you know, we realize now that, you know, things are opening up again. People are going to be out on set more. You know, it's great to be able to sit at home and do all your work, but, you know, you've got to be on the move, as you said, Brett. So, you know, all this feedback we're definitely working towards putting into these systems as they go forward. But yeah.
3-axis rack mount system that you could have redundancy power supply. Then I could add my Blackmagic peripherals into it. I could add the RAID drives and literally have an entire workstation, because when you think about it, I mean, it's sort of sitting over there in the corner, there's probably £70,000 worth of computer boxes that need to go out on jobs. And it's great that we're not just using it at home, we're taking it with us.
Yeah. It's over. What about you, HaZ? Is there anything you would, you know, change or?
You know, the interesting thing is, I agree with Brett. You know, like, I tend to move my machine around a lot as well. Like, I mean, not to the excess of like what Brett does, like goes on location, but for me, you know, I like to like rejig my room a lot. It's just, I'm that kind of guy. And sometimes like, I'm moving stuff around. Yeah, I kind of wish there was like caster wheels or something, like a case that had caster wheels at the moment. I could just wheel it around super easy. So yeah, the case makes a big difference. The other thing I would say also is like having a bit more USB-C connectivity would help, you know, because at the moment I've got like just the one on the top, which is fine, yeah, because I've got a WD Black connective box that connects straight into the machine, and then I can have as many USB-C devices connect, which is fine. But those are really the main two things. Like, as a system, it's pretty solid. And, you know, considering, you know, the last time I used the PC before this one was like, I don't know, like a decade ago, right? So for me, it's like, it's been great. You know, I could moan about Windows updates, but that's nothing to do with the machine. So yeah,
I think everyone's had one of those experiences with Windows updates. It's but no, you know, it's always great to hear this feedback. We you know, we're always open to it from yourselves and from everyone that's got 3XS systems. You know, we want to make the best systems for any sort of workflow that you're in. You know, we are the pro video team within Scan. We want to make the best workstations for a pro video workflow. You know, our pro graphics team, our pro audio teams do the same for their markets as well. So any feedback we always always appreciate. And one of the final things I'm going to mention, we've talked about all the power and these big GPUs and all the sort of great things you can do, and that's great. But I think HaZ, and you touched on it a little bit earlier, with regards to not having to work in proxies anymore, being able to do all these sorts of things real time. I was just wondering if there were any sort of tips or tricks or little sort of performance improvements that you guys might have picked up as users, whether it's of Unreal or Resolve or whatever it is, that you wanted to share for people who might be trying to get into these workflows but might not have as powerful a system just yet.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like you learn a lot of these tips as you're doing them, and making those mistakes and failing like hard. And that's the thing about real time, you fail hard pretty fast, but that's the beauty of it. You fail hard fast and you learn from it very fast, right? So I think for me, it's like when you load up Unreal, you're very easy. You just want to throw a bunch of geometry in there, like, right? And just like, because you can. And what I found is like, for example, we had a sequence where there's two characters in a helicopter and the helicopter's spinning. And we cut to the interior shot. Now I've only got one Unreal Engine scene with a big massive cityscape and a helicopter spinning, and I would just bring my camera into the helicopter. But guess what? My machine or my GPU is calculating all the geometry outside of the helicopter when it doesn't need to be. So what I would do is, as a tip, what I did was I created a camera move I created a plate basically of the city spinning, and then I would disable all of that stuff, bring in plain cards, kind of old school lo-fi front projection, back projection, play it back. But the thing about the cards is I can make them self-emissive. So it's not like you're just playing a flat texture. It's texture that's pouncing out light, kind of like what you do with virtual production LED walls, right? And then I've got a super fast 60 frames per second. I'm moving the camera around, getting the shots I want, and it feels frenetic. I'm seeing all the face animation, all of the lights and everything. So one of the things I would say is just because you have the GPU power doesn't mean you should abuse it. Especially when you're making an animated film, right? You kind of, it's all about getting real-time performances. Also, if you don't know if that performance is going to work or not, if it's laggy or dropping frames, that's one thing. The other tip I would give is organization of your data files. This may not, obviously this is not GPU related, but it helps a lot. I have a WD SSD drive connected in my machine, thanks to the expansibility of the machine. And I've siloed that for caching only. So all of my Unreal Engine caches live on there. I have another drive or an SSD partition section, and that is just for Resolve. So keep it siloed so they don't clash or overwrite, because sometimes you want to clear cache data. You don't want to clear an entire drive. That's also going to clear the cache for your Resolve or your Unreal Engine scenes. Data management is a huge part of being creative and being smart.
I totally agree. One of the things I'll say to people, when they're setting up a new system or learning a new software, anything like that, file management, drive management, all of that is just so key. It's never the sexy, exciting part of anything. Nobody really enjoys making bins and adding metadata or organizing files on drives. But it makes such a difference when it's actually all done. That taking that time at the beginning of a project, it pays itself off in no time when you actually start doing the work. I completely agree. How about you, Brett? Are there any sort of tips or tricks you might have around Omniverse or Unreal or anything like that that you might want to share with people?
I'd back up what HaZ said there, to be honest with you, totally. Biggest thing for me is operating system completely separate to any of the working files, and then a separate cache drive from there, or a rendering drive. So basically what I'll do is I'll run 3 drives. So I have my operating system on an SSD, then I have all my working, say if I'm in Resolve or if I'm in something that's using film frames, I'll have a RAID 5 hard drive that has all the raw files on it. And then I have another drive for the proxy drive, proxy files that's rendering the cache or the proxies or whatever. Sorry, misleading saying proxy. I never try and work in a proxy workflow if I can. The proxy files are only what it's rendering if I've done a color grade on it. they're nothing, but I'm always working off the raw files. What I found is if you're going around and whenever you introduced a proxy workflow, which is why I wanted a fast system, which is what we used to do, we'd go off and shoot 6K raw, then we'd make proxies, we'd edit in the proxies, and we'd have to relink back to the original files. That's where you got the issues. It always used to be something would break in that process, or a speed ramp didn't happen, or a zoom, or a reframe. And that's the thing that used to always cause us headaches. It was always when you used to come back to reconforming. So working inside a raw workflow, I'm not having to reconform anything. I'm working on those files. And that, keeping it on separate drives seems to be the way. And the speed of those drives, they're either Thunderbolt drives, which I've got hanging off the back for the big stuff. My Omniverse and my Unreal cache drive is 30 terabytes of RAID 5, just to give you an idea of the speed that we're operating at. And those drives are all got a minimum throughput of 400 megabits. So, they're all flying through. But, that way I'm not sitting here waiting for anything. There's no wasted time. Yeah. So, yeah, keep those drives, keep everything off the operating system. Just don't, I keep everything away from that drive. Yeah. And keep that clean and simple.
Yeah, I mean, that's some great advice. And I was having my own sort of flashbacks there as you were talking about relinking and conforming. I think anyone that's ever used an AEF or an XML will get 1,000 yards there thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, that used to be the thing I used to do, until Resolve really sort of came up to. I mean, Resolve was always really good at grading, but it used to be, let's face it, was not that great at editing. And so, I used to have to use a different piece of software to edit, and then I'd XML to Resolve, and then I'd do a round trip. And I used to dread doing that because I knew something was going to break along the line. And now Resolve is up on editing. I still jump to another piece of editing software occasionally, or I've got other clients who go, no, we're not going to use Resolve. So we still have to go back and do the round trip, or we might get in something that, that's already pre-graded and has to be done. So yes, I'm still jumping into other pieces of software, but anything that removes that round trip, anything that I don't have to go outside those other pieces of software makes me happy, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
As soon as you bring in all those pieces of software, and it's the same with that EXR files coming out of either out of Unreal or out of Omniverse are great. Lovely files to work in. They're single frames, 16-bit. I'm coming out of that. I can grade them. You drop on a LUT they've already got. I'm using an ASUS workflow quite often with that, and it just drops straight in. And especially now, Resolve's got this their own wide color gamut for HDR. Now an HDR and SDR grade is really easy to do. And in fact, I did my first Dolby Vision one the other day at home, which I set at 1,000 nits, and that gave me 3 levels of mastering from HDR to SDR on the one file. So it was great.
Yeah, it's great to hear. I love hearing about how people are pushing their workflows, and just the thought of doing Dolby Vision from home, is awesome. I love.
There was a bit of head banging on the table, but and a lot of reading and looking at some dodgy YouTube videos. But once I got through it, but again, it's great, because once I'd looked at having the ASUS monitors here, I could check it all. And the other thing that you knew it was working, because what was great was I literally uploaded it to YouTube, to my private YouTube, then walked in and then tested on my home TV to see what it looked like, and bang, it played. It was crazy.
Yeah, the sort of functionality you can have now across everything, and the ability to do these grades at home and just review them there and then on your smart TV or whatever it is. It just makes the whole process so much easier. You're no longer sending things off for review and waiting days for it or anything like that. Anything that speeds the process up and saves time, I think anyone is all on board for. It's a lot of time spent. We've talked about how you've got these real-time 3D scenes and things like that you can work on, and renders. I think Brett, you mentioned it took it used to take days for these things to render. The amount of time we've all spent sitting watching render bars and praying that there's no errors or anything like that. to get to where we are now in terms of, you know, the speed of things and the ease of things is just great.
I mean, I've set an alarm clock to go off at 3 o'clock in the morning many times to run downstairs. And to check the render to set up the next render, you know. So I've got so those.
Or if the render crashes. Or if the render crashes, that's the worst.
Yeah, we've all been through that. So, you know, I'm trying to explain to a client that, sorry, your edit has to finish tomorrow. Yeah, but it's not due for delivery for a week. I know, but we've got to render it. And, you know, you just see them looking, you go, what? Yeah, sorry, it's going to take a week to render. I think the longest I ever had, I mean, especially coming from a post workflow, we had 27 days of rendering on one job. So, yeah. I mean, that's,
Well, I don't envy it at all. Those must have been some nervy 27 days.
Yeah, well, that was when it used to have to be sent out to a post house to be done as well. So, you know, it was, you know, so you'll be able to do this. The power that you've got here now is crazy.
I remember, like, in visual effects, we would have to have a render, well, like a render monkey, we would call that person, and that render person would be working usually at night, so they'll start at 10 p.m. and finish at like 8 a.m. and they just watch renders, and they kind of like triage the renders. You know, if there's a frame glitch, they'll have to go into Maya or whatever the DCC software is and go in and reset. You know, look at the log, see what's causing the issue. Oh, okay, there's a missing texture here, or there is an issue where there's some, like, you know, sort of rendering issues, like with noise. Too much noise there, so I have to crank the sampling or reduce the sampling in some places. And you need that one person to do that. Whereas in real time now, you know, the minute you go to like center render movie queue and render, you're seeing all the frames play back in real time and render. So if there's anything that happens, you can instantly spot it really quickly and fix it.
And again, it's saving that time and freeing people up to be more creative, I think is just a huge part of you know, modern workflows and what we want our 3XS systems to be able to do. We don't want, you know, if we can cut down the amount of time people have to spend, you know, getting up at 3 a.m. and, you know, getting through, you know, as much coffee as they can to make sure they stay awake and make sure their render completes, you know, the better, really. So yeah, no, it's all exciting to see, you know, what sort of power we have nowadays and what people are doing with it. And with that, you know, I think you know we've come to a nice point there. And I just wanted to before we finish this up, I just wanted to thank both of you for your time and your feedback today. You know, on the 3XS workstations, we really do appreciate it, and we love hearing how these systems are being used. You know, for anyone watching this, check out Brett, check out HaZ, and check out their work. You know, it's always fantastic from both of them. So yeah, thank you everyone for watching, and thank you Brett and HaZ. I really appreciate your time, and best of luck, you know, finishing up your projects, and hopefully, you know, next project you guys have, you give yourselves a little bit of a break, in that you're not trying to, you know, develop a video game and do a film, or teach yourselves whole new software. And you know, I think you guys have earned a break after this.
Online stream to 6K footage, Brett.
Thanks, Alistair. Yeah, I wish I could say that's going to be the case, but I don't think so, because somebody's just suggested that we learned a form of 3D scanning for metaverse concerts. So yeah, I'm not too sure where that's going now.
Yeah, I think the ambitions will keep growing. That's the thing about projects. You know, just when you think you've nailed it, next year there's this new thing. You know, we haven't even touched on Unreal Engine 5, which is going to be the big thing that's going to be released by the end of this year.
And the software we were just playing around in that does the virtual scan, I think we worked out it was using 3 gigs a minute of storage. So yeah, somehow we have to work that out as our next little. So yeah, it's always, you know, the machines get faster, but then the equipment wants more. So
yeah, isn't it? You're always chasing the latest technology.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having us, guys. I really appreciate it.
Lovely. Cheers. Thank you very much. Thanks. Bye.